New tonight, residents of Pleasants County are still picking up the pieces after 2 tornadoes tore through their communities last month. Our Chase Campbell has the latest on relief efforts.
2 weeks after tornadoes tore through Pleasants County, recovery efforts are still underway, and the road back is proving to be a slow one. Work in St. Mary's has been at the front end of the effort, coordinating supplies and helping families navigate the relief process. The organization says demand from their food pantry has surged since the storms hit, with volunteers giving out roughly a month's worth of food in the span of a week. Donated gift cards are helping families restock freezers after days without power. As families work through the relief process, Neighbor Network Executive Director Jennifer White reminds people to complete the West Virginia Emergency Management Division's disaster survey, which helps officials assess the extent of the damage.
We're hearing from the community that a lot of people still haven't filled out a damage survey. A lot of people are still getting in touch with their insurance companies if they had insurance. We're helping each other and people are being wonderful, but we need to get the word out more that if you haven't filled that survey out, you need to fill out the survey.
White says around half a dozen houses in Pleasants County were completely destroyed, with dozens more damaged enough to warrant a call to the insurance company. For families living through it, the damage goes beyond what can be measured in insurance claims. Tina Bills, who volunteers at Neighbor Network and whose father's home was damaged in the storm, says some areas are still without phone and internet service, with repairs not expected until at least August 18th. She says schools are getting ready to start, and some displaced families still don't know where they'll be living.
It's heartbreaking to see your family, your neighbors, the people you grew up with, the land that your dad has owned since 1983 and grew up in, and gone. The view is totally changed. Totally changed.
Both women say the community's needs keep shifting as recovery drags on, from food and water to school clothes for kids and gas cards for families who burned through fuel-running generators. Anyone who wants to help or volunteer for a cleanup crew can call Neighbor Network at 304-684-3990. In St. Mary's, Chase Campbell, WTAP News.